Tonight we're going to do a quick kind of crash course into React. Going to be doing a lot of the same to-do app that we did last week, so that way we're not learning anything really new there. More or less just learning very quickly some React. If you have any questions as I go along, please don't hesitate to ask. Possibly going a little too fast. If I am, don't be afraid to let me know. But yeah, let's get started. So, CodeSandbox.io, where we've been building everything else. So I'll set up in chat. If you're new, I just have a GitHub account to log in, just because it's really easy, and then you can also hook up CodeSandbox to GitHub to do all your Git stuff. But yeah, so once we're in CodeSandbox, we're going to be creating a new sandbox, and we're going to be using the React one, which is also under the official templates, but I used it last week, Tuesday. So we can just click that, and it will spin up a nice little React app for us. So same thing. If we make changes and save them in our code, they update right away in the preview. However, you notice our code's looking a little different than what it was last week. We still have our styles that we were working with before. We still have an index. Now we have an app. It might look like our index.html is missing. Well, now that's up in public. You can kind of take a look there. We have similar stuff. We still have our doc type, our HTML. It's now specified English. We have our char set that we had before. Some new meta tags. Usually not super important. These are extra features you can add to your website, but not super required. Got our title. What else we got here? We got our body. Yeah, a new NoScript one. So this one is for if the user is coming to your website and they don't want to run JavaScript, they only want HTML and CSS, then they will see this and it'll say, hey, you need to enable JavaScript to run this app. Which is actually very relevant to a discussion I was having earlier today about whether or not JavaScript in apps or in the web is a good thing. For my 2 cents, it's both good and bad. Depends on how you use it. But yeah. And then we have just a div with an ID of root here. This is important for using React. Just a quick idea. So React. So last week when we were building our to-do app, we ourselves were putting in all the HTML, and we were manually, essentially, updating that HTML, adding styles or adding content to it and manually redrawing it. React does all of that for us. However, React needs a place to start. And that's what this div here does, is it's our way, well, this combined with some JavaScript is our way of telling React, hey, here's where I want you to draw everything. Here and inside of here, it will all be React. We don't want to add anything inside this div. But yeah, so that's our index.html. After that, so then we go back to our index.js, because this is usually where we start. There's some new syntax here. We are importing React from React. This is a way to bring in dependencies from basically code that someone else has written, and we're borrowing their code and using their code. If you want to know where that comes from, we can look at our package.json. There's a bunch of information in here. There's the name of our app, which is React right now. I don't know if CodeSandbox, let's try changing this. My to-do CodeSandbox should be fine with us changing that. See if it's still, yep, cool. All right, so this is like the name of your app. Not super important when you're building an app versus building code you're going to be sharing with anyone else. Oh, enjoy dinner. Thanks for the hope. I hope it's a good stream. Maybe I'll talk to you tomorrow. We have a version here. Again, this is not super important for our app. This is more so important for when you're sharing your code with somebody else, but it could be useful for your app as well. You can use this information. Description, same. We'll update this. Simple to do app made in React. Some keywords. So if you were to publish this as a package, these keywords can be used to help find your packaged up code. Main, this is where our tooling should start looking for code. So when our tooling starts everything up, it's going to look here in source index.js. Then we have some dependencies. So this is where React starts coming into play. Our dependencies are things, or other people's code, essentially, that we need for our app to run. So these are things that we need at runtime for our app to work, which are React, React-DOM, and React-scripts. And the name of it is the name of the package, so do this here. There we go. It's fun. So yeah, I just clicked and dragged it over to do a little split. Oh. Well, it's covering up my... Why is it doing that? Oh, funky. I don't know why it's put a little scroll bar there. That's a little frustrating. Anyways, so our index.js, this React that we're importing from is this React in my dependencies. We also have React DOM here. That's here. I'm importing React DOM from React DOM. And React scripts is used probably by something else. We're not using that directly. Then we have our dev dependencies. Our dev dependencies are required for us to be able to build our app, but are not required by the end user. So these are only used during development. So it's a nice little thing. We don't want to ship all of this with our project because that's way too much. You don't want to send all of your tools. Like if you were building a car, you don't send your entire toolbox with the car to the customer. You just send them the car. So yeah. Then we have some scripts. CodeSandbox is running these scripts for us. So in this case, it ran start for us to start our app in dev mode, kind of. And then this last one, browser list, that is another tool or another configuration that is saying, hey, these are the browsers I'm targeting. So, for example, not IE less than or equal to 11. So only wants IE 12 plus. So we're not gonna like design this in any way to run on IE 10. If it happens to run on IE 10, cool, but if it breaks on IE 10, we're like, I'm sorry, you need to upgrade your browser. There's a bunch of other ones you can see in here. Not dead just means that somebody's using it, basically. Yeah. There's a lot more information you can look up about these. I won't go too much into detail. That whole nother world. So yeah. So let's see here. Why? Close this one so I get rid of that little scroll bar. So anyways, I'm gonna start Open both these up, close my little file explorer. I'm going to open the preview so we can talk about what we're seeing in our code and what we're seeing on the screen. So what we got here? So we're importing React because we want to use React. It's doing a bit of stuff behind the scenes for us. React DOM because we're specifically using React to build websites. There's also React Native if you are building for an Android app or an iPhone app. But we are building for the browser, for the DOM. We're importing app. So this little / is saying from the same directory. So from the same source directory that our index.js is in, we're going to import our app.js. It just kind of assumes the .js on the end. It assumes that for you. Makes that assumption. So we're importing a bunch of other code. And then we have our root element. And we are doing kind of like we did last week. We're getting a document, get element by ID, and root. So if you remember in our index.html, down in the body, we had this div with an ID root, and I said that was where React we're telling React where to start drawing things, where to start displaying things. Well, there's that root. We're saying that is our root element. And then we come in here and we say React DOM. Well, I want you to render some React code in this root element. There's a little comma there if you don't see it. We're going to render everything inside of that root element. Okay. So then what are we rendering? Well, there's a little new syntax here. This is not JavaScript, but it does run inside of JavaScript. This is JSX. You can kind of think of it like part JavaScript and part HTML. It's going to look a lot like HTML, but it behaves kind of like JavaScript. It might not mean too much to you at the moment, if this is all still very brand new to you, but just know that it is slightly different. I cannot go back to my old app and write JSX. I have to set up a bunch of tooling to do so, which is partially why CodeSandbox is really nice, because it sets up all that tooling for you. You don't have to go and set it all up. CodeSandbox does. Okay, so then we have this React, and we're calling .strict mode. That is to help us with, I think it's error messages if I remember right, and a couple other things. It's basically to make sure our code is nice and clean. You can think of it that way. Like HTML, you have your opening and your closing tags. And then if you just have a single tag, you can make it self-closing. You don't need these separate opening and closing tags. I believe if I try to do that, I hit save. Oh, no. Some tools will automatically convert that for you. It looks like CodeSandbox does not. All right. But anyways, inside there you can see we have our app, the same app here. So we can dive in, see what that looks like. So again, we're importing React because it does some stuff behind the scenes for us. Every file that has JSX in it also needs this import React from React. We're also importing our styles. Our tooling lets us do that, lets us import our CSS. If you notice, we actually have to specify that it is .css. Otherwise, it will assume it is .js. So we're just saying import that, and that will actually bring in all of our styling too. And then we are exporting. So this one is also new, export. So export is saying that you want to expose this value or this function or this class or this information to anyone else that's using your code. So for example, I could have a constant fun number equals 42. Well, no one else who uses my app.js can access that fun number. However, I can come in here and say export fun number. Oh, it doesn't like it that way. Let me move the export at the front. If I put the export at the front, now anyone who uses my code does have access to fun number. So that's what that does, is it exposes it to the outside world. So we're exporting. Default just means like the main thing you're exporting. The difference being if I export that fun number, const fun number is 42. If I go back into my index.js, if I want to import that, I need to do that with some squiggly brackets. Fun number. I can import it that way. Or I could instead do import star as, we'll say lowercase app, you can as whatever, from /app, and then I can call it with app.funNumber. So those are the two ways. Put that up there just so you can see. So yeah, so those are the two ways, or I can say down here fun number. Those are the two ways to get fun number from app.js into index.js. So, but we don't need a fun number right now because we are trying to build a to-do app. That, comma, okay, save that. So app.js. So we're exporting default. Get rid of that export there. A function. So a lot of React is just exporting functions and passing functions around. Lots and lots of functions, which makes it pretty easy to work with. We do need it to be a capital letter here, because a capital letter in this JSX says that it was made by us or made by another person. If it is lowercase like these are, that means it's just HTML. So like div. If I wanted to use some other thing, if I had some other thing here with a capital D div, that means that div was made by a person and might have some state along with it or do some other interesting things. Lowercase means that it comes from the browser from HTML. So yes, we have our function app, and it is returning some JSX, which we've wrapped in parentheses. So we have a div on the outside with a class name called app. This is very similar to our HTML, although in HTML, this would just be class. The reason we can't say just class equals is because class is already a thing in JavaScript, and because JSX is both JavaScript and HTML, it can't copy JavaScript. So we have to add that class name there. Otherwise, this is exactly the same as your HTML class. We have an H1, it says hello Twitch, which is right here. We have our H2, says start editing to see some magic happen, right here. So React is saying take all of this right here and essentially replace this with all of that, and take all of that and put it inside of our root element. And that is how we get all of this nice stuff here. If you want to see how that works with like our color or with our CSS, we can say like color Rebecca purple, and it changes it all to Rebecca purple automatically for us. So yeah. So hopefully that wasn't too fast and everyone was able to kind of keep up a little bit. So with that, we can kind of start to block out what our to-do app looks like. So we have our app, we have our little header up here. We can say my React to do app, because mine's made out of React. And then we had, after that, we had a div, closing tag, we had an input. If you have this stuff already, readily available, feel free to just copy and paste it. I'm just going to write it over again just because I remember most of it, for the most part, off the top of my head. We have our button. Let's say add task. We'll name this My Task Tracker. I like that name a little bit more. No one needs to know it's in React. Okay. After that, we had our group of filters. So we had those buttons in. Let's see. Filter. That's right, I said filter at the beginning. Filter. All. Completed. Incomplete. Cool. And then after that, put some white space in there, just visually break it up so it's easier to see what's going on. Unordered list. And we had list item. And inside there we have a label. Got a closing tag. And inside the label we had an input of type equals checkbox. And then we had a span. And inside the span was our placeholder task when we initially started out. Okay, now I'll just say this is type equals text. It always defaults to text, but I kind of like having that little extra indicator there. It's kind of nice. All right, so got our rough idea of everything blocked out already, which is nice. If you copy and pasted yours, you can copy and paste your styles over too. Then yours is probably already blocked out. If you need any help with that, let me know. All right. So then we want to start adding all our functionality in, which is where React is probably the most different. So React is going to handle kind of some of this state for us. Some of managing the state and managing events for us. Help us along. So the first, what we're going to do is we're going to go to React's website. Toss that in chat just in case you want a quick link to it. And let's see, docs. And actually, I'm just going to search up here. I'm going to search for hooks. Need the API reference because I do not use hooks often enough, so it's always a nice little refresher. So we're going to use one called use state. We'll start with use state. So I'm going to copy that from here, and that is from our React import. So they expose a use state hook, and it is going to end up looking like this. I'm just going to copy and paste that in. So what we're doing here is we're going to say there's a couple things going on here. We're going to look at the right side first. So we're going to say use state, and we need to give it some initial state. the state we're most concerned with at the moment is our list of to-dos. I'll start there. So our list of to-dos is initially an empty array. And then this is actually returning an array of 2 items. This is called destructuring here. So this is expecting an array with 2 items in it. The first item is our state, and the next item in that array is a function called setState. Well, we can call it whatever. setState is probably, we'll call it update to-dos. And our state we will call to-dos. Actually, instead of update to-dos, we'll call it set to-dos, because that's what it is doing. It's not necessarily updating, it is setting what the value of our to-dos is. So, this to-dos here, we're going to come down here. You know roughly what this is going to look like. I'm going to highlight it all. I'm going to hit Control/. I'll comment it out for us. If you notice, our comment inside the JSX is squiggly brackets /star and */squiggly brackets. That is the open and closing syntax for comments in JSX. Inside of that, we're going to put some new squiggly brackets now inside our unordered list. Those squiggly brackets are saying, instead of writing JSX, now we're going to be writing some JavaScript, just some plain old JavaScript. It's a way of escaping from the JSX code into the JavaScript code. So we're going to do that. We're going to take our to-dos. We are going to say .map, because we want to iterate over every single one of them. Remember, this gets a function that will receive each of our to-dos. And then for each one, we want to return some more JSX. So we essentially want to return something that looks like that list item there. So I'm just going to paste that in, hit save. All right, so everything seems to be working. Nothing's crashing, which is a good sign. So let's see here. So we had before, if you remember, some comments here. Before our to-do had some content, whatever. So this is to task. We had is complete, which is true or false. We had an ID, which was some number, 5. Alright, so that's what's on this to do. So we can come in here, set placeholder task. I'm going to escape into some JavaScript. I want to say to-do.content. And for the input here, we're going to say it's checked is equal to, and then we need to escape into some JavaScript again here. To-do.is complete. Okay. And then also, this ID actually comes in really important here. React likes us when we're calling map over an array of items to whatever we're returning. It wants us to give that a key, and it wants that key to be unique. So every single item in this list needs to have some unique ID. We happen to have that with to-do.id. So that actually comes in super handy. So we're drawing our to-dos, supposedly. How do we add them? Well, I would also like new to-do, set new to-do, use state, need some state to keep track of our text here, our new to-do text or new task text. So I'm going to say the value is equal to, escape into some JavaScript, that new to-do. I'm going to say on change, we are going to do a function here that is going to get an event. And inside that, we are going to call set new to do with event.target.value. Okay, so if that's still working, we should be able to type here, and it all still works there. Cool, cool. I'll come back through and explain some of this too if I'm going too fast. Right. And then our button, we're going to say on click. You notice too, I'm doing some camel casing with like my on change, my on click. That's just because that is what React expects. When it makes this into JavaScript, it'll change this into like on click, all lowercase. Click. It's also a function. We don't care about the event. We just want to see if our new to do does not equal an empty string, and if it does not equal an empty string, we're going to say set to dos equal to let's see, to-dos. So I did square brackets, should be 3 dots, and we're to-dos, and then comma. And I'm going to create a new to-do here. I'm going to say the content colon new to-do is complete. It's false. And ID equals next ID, which we will need to create now. Probably get upset about that. We're going to say set new to do be an empty string. Yeah, let's add another quick state in here. I'm going to track that ID. Next ID set next ID. Start our initial one at 0. We'll set next ID to next ID plus 1. Okay, so let's make sure this is working first. Cool, it is. So let's talk about what we've done. Why 3 dots? I will get there. So I'm going to shrink this down so we can look better at our code here. All right, so like before, we were checking to see if make sure it's not an empty string, so that way we're not adding empty to-dos. Then we're going to set new to-dos. So this syntax right here, let's break this down. Remove some of this so we can see a little bit better what's going on here. So we have our brackets, so we're making an array, and then we're saying dot 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 to-dos. That is spreading our to-dos out through this new array. So it's essentially copying them into a new array. That dot 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 is JavaScript's way of saying spread this data structure, this array, into this new array. And then we're saying the end here. This is basically the same as last time. This is creating our new to-do with our content, our is complete, and our ID. So yeah, so this is creating the new one. And this is copying all of the old one over. And the reason we do that, and we don't do something like to-dos.push, and then all of our new to-do information in there. The reason we don't do that is because React will see this and say, oh, this is the same array. I don't need to draw anything new because nothing has changed. It doesn't understand that we've pushed something onto the end. By copying it, it is saying, oh, hey, I've never seen this one before. This is new information. I better go update everything. React, under the hood, React has a structure called, basically called model view update, where we describe our model, our data up here. We describe our view, where we're returning our view, and then this right-hand side this is kind of our update. So when we update information, React says, hey, there is new information. You're welcome. Here is the new information. Please draw it. Tell me, we're not actually drawing it. React is saying, how would you like this to be drawn? So we describe how we would like it to be drawn, and then it goes and draws it all for us. So all of this content here, we are not drawing this. React is drawing all of it for us. We're just telling it how we would like it to be drawn. It's what's known as declarative. This syntax right here is, well, this portion essentially right here is declarative programming. You are describing how you want things to be done, and the tool is taking that description and doing it for you. You could kind of think of it like cooking. You are writing the recipe, and the machine is going and doing the cooking based on your recipe. It's a very, I like this style of programming a lot because it is very easy to reason about. It's very easy to say, oh, what does my thing look like? Well, here, I can tell you exactly what it's going to look like. Based on this, I have a pretty good idea in my head of what exactly this will look like. It might be a little difficult for you because this is still new, but the more accustomed you become with writing HTML, basically, JSX in this case, the more you will say, oh yeah, I know exactly what that's going to look like. In the case of our previous to-do app where we were writing the JavaScript ourselves and mutating things ourselves, that it might be a little bit harder to imagine, especially when you're talking about thousands or millions of lines of code. It becomes very difficult to put into your head what all this is going to look like. So by breaking it down into these little pieces, in React they're known as components, we know we can much more easily compartmentalize each piece of the app. Which, now that we have basic adding of tasks, I can kind of show you a good way to kind of compartmentalize that. So let's go in here, let's go into our source. I'm going to close out the preview real quick, and I'm going to create a new file, and I'm going to call this todo.js. Then I come back into our app. I'm going to scroll down here, and I'm going to copy this entire return section. I'm going to paste in here, and then going to give some little red squiggles, but that's fine. We're going to be creating a new component. So I'm going to import React, because it's a React component. We need to do that from React. And then, because we want to expose this to the outside world, we're going to say expose. We want this to be the default thing that people grab. So I'm going to say default function, brackets around all of this. Okay, now it's going to say, well, I don't know what to do is. So I'm going to come back over here. We're going to leave that for now. That's fine. We'll let it be upset. We need to import that to do from / because it's in the neighboring file. To do needs to be capitalized here. When you import, it does not have to be capitalized in what's the default. but we need it to be capitalized because we're doing JSX. Come down here, and instead of returning all of that, we are going to return our to-do here. But we need to get this information into here. So what we're going to say is we're going to say, well, we need to know what our content is. There are other ways to do this, but I like being a bit explicit in what I'm passing down. I'm going to pass down some content, not just basically like an attribute. We're going to pass down is complete. To-do.is complete. And the ID, we'll pass that down too. But remember, we also need to provide a key here because we're iterating over a list. So just copy and paste that to the front, save, and it'll format things nicely for me. I can get rid of this. Say, okay, so you passed it in, but how do we use it over here? Well, anything that you pass in as basically like attributes, like you would do for type or value attributes on our input, these attributes on our component come in as the first argument as props. So now instead of to-do.id, we can say props.id, props.isCompleted, and props.content. Get rid of our squiggles, and close the files over here, open up our preview, let it do its thing, and there we go. It's still working. So now, oh yeah, we can also get rid of our key here. The key is never a bad thing. The key always does help React. Actually, teensy tiny bit performance-wise, it's not really a thing to be concerned with where you should be adding it everywhere. It's really mostly important in lists when you're mapping over things, but you can add it other places. But anyways, yeah, so we are now, we've broken out our actual to-do. This entire piece is actually its own separate function. So when I'm in here, and get rid of this comment, just shrink things down. Well, I'm in here looking at my to-do app, and I get to this point, and I'm like, oh, if I want to know how a to-do looks, how it works, let's go to this to-do, which I can see is imported from todo.js. And now when I'm looking at this, I know everything I need to know about how this to-do is displayed on screen. It doesn't have any state that it has to worry about or manage. It is just concerned with displaying. No, but never did our checkbox. We have when it's checked, but we're not updating it. So let's do that. Function here. It's going to take an ID. It is complete. How I want to do this. So we need to update our to-dos. We have the ID. We need to update it. Oh yeah, let's do it. Let's say function. We know it's going to take an ID and is. Actually, no, we don't need to know is complete because we're just toggling that. So this is going to go through and updated to-dos is equal to, we're going to use that same ... that spread syntax to copy our to-dos. And then we're going to say set to-dos. And say our updated to-dos. We're going to map over them. To-do in there. Say if ID is equal to to-do.id. Then I want to say to-do.isComplete equals not to-do.isComplete. I'm just going to return that to do regardless. So, oh, we need a name for this. Toggle to do. Okay, so we have that. We need to pass that in, that function in. So toggle checked. And pass that into our to-dos. So our to-dos expect a toggle. Actually, we'll say toggle complete. Complete. So it expects something toggle complete. So we can come in here, we can say on click, we'll try that. I'm not sure which one it's going to be offhand. Function. When that gets called, we'll call toggle complete with props.id. Oh, sorry, props.toggle complete. Okay. There are definitely some things in here that I'm doing that are not exactly best performance type things, but they definitely get us to where we're going. Add our task. So now we can toggle it. All right, cool. Now I don't have my styling copied over. You might. But let's do something a little different. Since we're working with React, we can play around with some different stuff. I want to come in here and I want to update the style. You notice I have two squiggly brackets, opening and closing. That's because the first one is saying write some JavaScript inside there, and I want to put an object in there. And I'm going to say, oh, which was it? I don't remember the CSS for that, crossing out. MDN CSS line through. Text decoration, underline. Let's see. Line through, text decoration line through. So I want text decoration. Not doing dash, we're doing instead of a dash D, we're doing a capital D. React will convert that to dash D for us. And we want to say props.isComplete, question mark. If it is complete, is it line through? Line through. Line dash TH colon none. So this question mark colon is a shorthand syntax for her saying if else. So if this is true, then we're going to do the first thing, otherwise we do the second thing. So complete task, that, check it, and hey, there we go. When it is checked, we get our little line through it, which is pretty awesome. So yeah, so that is an inline style in JSX. Similar to in JavaScript or in HTML, you would have written it as style equals, and then a bunch of information in here. You can still do the same thing. Let's see, text decoration line through. Will it let us do that? Oh, no duplicate props. Oh, it's upset about us doing duplicates. Cut that out real quick. Oh, so it doesn't let us, React does not let us do our style in an HTML way. You can never remember all the little details. So thankfully error messages help us out sometimes. So we now have most of our stuff. Let's see, what else? We can do our filtering. Still gotta do our filtering. So that's basically another state, which is our filter and set filter. our initial filter is none. Come down here. Before we map over everything, just like before, we can filter over it. Function that gets it to do. And we were doing a switch on filter. And in the case of completed, we were returning do.isComplete. In the case of incomplete, we'll say we're returning return not do.isComplete. And in every other case, the default case, we just return true. Okay. And then we need to add click handlers for each of these. On click equals escape into JavaScript with some squiggly brackets. Function here. And when we click this one, we will call set filter to none. I'm just gonna save that. And then I'm gonna copy everything between the N and the next one. I'm gonna paste it here. And I'll paste it there, and I'll hit save, format. When we click completed, I want to change it to completed. When I click incomplete, I'll change it to incomplete. All right, so refresh just in case. First, second, third. Okay, complete that one. We'll say completed. Filters it for us, incomplete, and all. So we got our filtering back. All right, and then, all right, so our last one was, and one of the other ones was using local storage. So how to go about using local storage here. So we were storing our ID, initial ID, say let. I don't remember if we had this as let before or const. I'll say 0, and then we will try to do, we'll try and say saved ID equals local storage get item. Wolf.x react do example long d, and then if saved ID does not equal null, then we'll say initial ID equals parse int saved ID base 10. Don't catch any errors, and then we'll just ignore that. Okay, so then our initial ID, instead of just hard coding it to 0, it is either 0 or whatever we save to storage. Actually, let's make that const ID key. Here's our ID key. Then we need to save that. So we increment that here. So we will say local storage.set item is equal, our key ID is equal to next ID boss1. Set that there. We also want to save all of our to-dos. So let's see here. Key for that, to-dos key is equal to copy most of this, paste that example to-dos. Let initial to-dos equal, start out with an empty string or empty array there. And then we will do a try catch for that as well. Try saved to-dos is equal to local storage.get item to-dos key. If saved to-dos does not equal null, then we will say initial to-dos is equal to JSON dot parse saved to-dos. Catch any errors, and we're just going to ignore them for this. Then we need to save our to-dos. So we'll break this out. We'll say const new next to-dos is equal to that. So we're going to pass that into there. We're also going to say local storage.set item to-dos key. We're going to pass, we need to JSON.stringify all of those. Okay. So basically what I was doing this stuff should all be the same as last time. Just making a variable for our key so we don't have to accidentally mistype this. Giving ourselves an initial state. We're going to try to load it from local storage. Any error happens along the way, we ignore it for now. And then we're setting our initial state to those initial ID and initial to-dos. But now we're only updating them in one spot. I guess actually, when I think about it, we also need to save when they get checked. Let's see here. I'm going to move this map here. I'll move this map to right here, which is fine. So we're going to set to-dos to the updated to-dos, and then we're going to save them as well. Okay, nice little white space in there. Okay, let's see if this works. A lot of changes there. Add second, add that. We're going to check off our second one. Refresh the page. Hey, look at that. Look at that. They loaded up nice. Nice. Just make sure that this didn't reset to 0 if we add that. Hey, it did not update the other one, so this must be our correct ID. If we wanted to, we could always display it just for fun, just to verify. Escape here, and then we'll just display our next ID. Hey. Yep, so when we refresh, starts at 3. Awesome. So yeah, that was in an hour, almost exactly. A very quick crash course in porting our vanilla JavaScript, HTML, CSS to-do app into React. There's a lot more you can explore here. useState is only one of many hooks. Look back here briefly. There's useEffect. This would be for making requests to servers or other websites or other various things. There's other. It's not just for that. You can do other things with it as well. Use context. Context is a way of passing data not from parent to child, but parent to grandchild or great-grandchild, you could think of it. So like in this case, our parent is app and our child is to-do.js. Well, what if we nested something inside of to-do and something else inside of that, and inside of that, inside of that, and we wanted to pass this all the way down, some type of like generic styling or generic font choice or other similar information. Anything you can think of where you aren't passing it directly parent to child, but all the way down. We have use reducer, which is kind of like use state, but allows you to combine some of these things together. For example, use reducer would probably be a good thing to use. You could probably replace, and I would probably recommend replacing the ID and the to-dos, and probably the new to-do as well. All three of those could probably put in use state or use reducer together because they are always working together. The filter's kind of extra information, but those three are almost always used together. Every time we create a new to-do, we're updating the list of to-dos, we're incrementing the next ID, we're clearing out the new to-do input. So they're all intertwined. Use callback, use memo. Use memo is more of a performance thing. Use ref. This is a way to get access to the actual HTML that React is generating for us. Otherwise, you don't inherently have access to it. What else we got here? Use imperative handle. I've never used that one. Use layout effect. Never used that one. Use debug value. That's an interesting one. Never used that one before. Always adding new ones, feels like. At least for me. I don't use React a ton, so for me it feels like they're always using new ones. For you, they're all new, I presume. So, you get to enjoy all the newness with me.